know how to operate. He didn't want to bother. He didn't have a cordless telephone.
Because I was raised in very poor, and we had no money. And my dad always wanted me to do something.
Oh, okay. We always used to trip over the wire. We had people walking back and forth, going under or over or around, trying to go around the wire.
No, the cord was kind of really good because I could go from like one telephone to another, route bounding and stuff, and I could get the cordless out there.
We could go to breakfast.
We go to breakfast, take the cordless with us, and could get. We have gotten several phone calls earlier than what we anticipated. No, I'm enjoying all of it. He bought me the stereo for Christmas, and I really enjoyed that. He always used music on, although I had a little radio on his thing.
And I've got the Sony with very fine quality sound. And so we turn it on, leave it on. Also sugar the advent of having music going all the time in the house. There's a lot of advantages to it, and one of which is keeps the bugs away. The bugs will not come into the house if there's too much music in it.
And I've never had a bug either, except he left the music on.
An alternative express there. You're going to have to get the decon out or bring the bug man in. We can play a little music.
We have a bug man for outside, right? I haven't seen a bug in here.
Well, there's too many to mention at this particular meeting, but there are so many advantages to having music playing all the time in your life. It doesn't have to be very loud. It can be very low or anything that's comfortable, but there's a lot of advantages to the structure of your house, and bugs and burglars and everything else. But then the VCR I brought in, I brought two of them in so we could double off tape, has been an advantage.
Well, I really have enjoyed that because that's still isn't my opinion. It's always a good movie on at 9 o'clock. And
At 5 minutes after 9, she sounded good.
so Ralph tapes them for me. We get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and watch movies.
Oh, you get up at that time, and you kind of get woken up around kind of 3 or...
We wake up at
4 o'clock every morning.
Well, I woke up at 4 this morning also. I was wide awake at 4.
90% of the time, we just sleep.
Oh, that's good. I think that's the time we get a lot of information. And I know one time, one of the things we received on that was just because the electromagnetic ELF and all the different kind of transmission. I mean, during the day it's peak transmission of the electromagnetic field, all over the man-made electromagnetic field. And at that time of night is when you can tune into the universal electromagnetic field.
Perhaps you're more relaxed because your physical needs have been taken care of, the rest of your body and your brain, etc. So it's in a perhaps a semi-beta state, not quite fully on fight or flight alert yet. So you can kind of drift between the sub and subconscious and the conscious mind and start expressing things that are a little deeper or more meaningful or reaching a little deeper.
What is
My name? Jose.
Guardian. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody, Ralph.
I won't tell him my name is Ralph Ring, right? I won't say that. Yeah, I'm Ralph Ring.
You're not going to give your middle name?
Warren Ring, Ralph Warren Ring. I don't use Warren. Well, anyway, I have been in my travels trying to enjoy life. And found that sometimes I'd be going in the wrong direction, looking for experiences that's necessary to grow with. And I started chasing rainbows, and finally realized that you don't really have a test line. It keeps eluding me. So I finally just decided to stop chasing, looking for anything. Concentrate on doing what's comfortable for me now. And Ruthie too. It just came out of nowhere in my life. And I said, oh, go away. I don't want is not what I felt, what I was thinking. Because I felt an immediate attraction, immediate rapport, immediate everything was kind of like through the veil I could see standing behind the veil there was everything that I'd always looked for. So I started clearing the veil or the cobwebs away in my own mind to see if she was real, and she was still standing there waiting and waiting. And I've always been a fight and flight person because I was always looking, and if this wasn't it, I was going to look somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. And I've done that for years. But when I met Ruthie, why everything changed. I realized that I was home for good, and this is what I was looking for. And it's so matter of fact that and so natural that I overlooked it at first. And it's still, to this day, I'm readjusting to the greater reality that really happened. It's difficult to comprehend when part of you is used to searching and never find it. And then all of a sudden you find where you're searching.
And you know when you practice it, you stop looking.
Yeah.
I think it's
Right. And I knew that in the pursuit of my destiny, which is my preoccupation with alternative ideas and magnetism specifically, I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I tried that dozens of times. Tried it in different ways. And even trying it with financial support, without financial support, group support. Nothing seemed to really work. And I found that I needed the stabilizer, which Ruthie has now become, and we're becoming like a unit. And I feel that we're still engaged in the honeymoon of our relationship. And that's when it's all
You showed you're going to be on, but they'll be okay.
Oh, all right.
I mean, we got to get you used to the camera, see? I mean, geez.
Yeah. If this ends up on sightings. I thought I saw Ralph Ring, you know.
Yeah, do you want to do something with the computer? That's all I
No,
know.
not over here, this computer?
Yeah.
No.
Not You want to know if I was dressed? I says, what?
What did he have in mind?
Did he want to help you get dressed?
No, he's worked for us, and he's married, and he just wanted to come over and get something off of this dock and put on that one down there. So now I got a hook full of gifts, and I said we're into other things right now. So,
Gee, we're glad you're dressed, Rizzy.
yeah, I am too.
That's what somebody asked, they want to come over, they don't want to. Are you dressed? That's perfect, because if you're dressed, they assume they can just come on over anyway.
Right.
I suppose it was going to matter if he was just going to be here a few minutes. It had so long since.
Right, he'd be here the rest of the afternoon and into the conversation and the whole bit. I know Ted very well. I know him very well.
Well, anyway, my chosen destiny is to fulfill the idea of everybody having fishing poles instead of giving fish away. And that equates to the projects, plural, that I've been working on for 40, 50 years now, on the idea of zero gravity craft or hovercraft, or whatever you call that, many different names, but a craft that can be built economically feasible so that everybody can afford one, that will be their habitation and their transportation and their subsistence all in one thing. A recyclable ecosystem, if you will, where they, when activated, will take care of itself. The garden will feed and water itself by natural law, not by guesswork. You don't have to guess when something's hungry or thirsty. When it's hungry, it turns on its food, and when it's thirsty, it turns on the water. And all the waste products will be recyclable into this ecosystem, so that it's self-sustaining. I feel that since I've been working on it, things have changed. I worked in the 50s with Otis Carr on the hovercraft principle, and we had rotating wheels, a wheel rotating in one direction and a wheel rotating in the other direction, and we had moving parts, and it produced a zero gravity effect. And since then, I've met people like Ken Page and John Tyson, or have followed into the field of solid-state circuitry, et cetera, and find that, you no longer have to have moving parts to produce the same thing. And I feel that when this is allowed to happen, the monetary system that we know today will simply dissolve and become back to a more natural barter system based on the needs of people and not necessarily on the wants. Although I think everybody can be completely happy when they have their own home paid for and their utilities, they don't have to worry about electric bills or water bills or any other kind of bill. They can devote their time to contemplating what they really want to do with their life. Instead of having to go out and toil for a living at a 9-to-5 job, they can become a guitarist or a flutist or an artist or a botanist or anything that their natural talent would guide them to do. Then you have somebody that's in love with their work. They love to do this for the joy of doing this, and they can't wait to share it with someone else. Like, oh, you need a gardener? I'm your man. Or you need a plumber? I love plumbing. Just let me in your house. I don't want any money. Just let me in your house. I'll show you this system that you won't believe. This kind of an attitude and enthusiasm is exactly the word I use for that. Perpetuates enthusiasm in everyone, so that everybody is sharing their natural interests and basically exchanging energy, like the plumber fixing the carpenter's house, etc., and vice versa. We're working together on this kind of a system. It diminishes the need for greed. It makes greed no longer stylish, no longer feasible to store and hoard or anything, because you've got everything you need next door or over here or across the street or wherever you want. When I met Ruthie, I told her there was a lot she didn't know about me yet. She says, I'm watching you and I'm waiting. And she has been very patient. And I've tried to explain some of these ideas. And at first, when I was caught talking to John Tyson on the telephone...
Caught. I like that. You got caught.
I thought she was asleep, and John and I had got into a rather involved conversation on the phone. And then after I hung up the phone, which I thought she was still resting, she said, what the hell was that all about? She said, are you going away to another planet and leaving me here? She said, who are you guys? What are you doing? Et cetera, et cetera. So I've just had to step by step assure her that the only difference between peoples is their chosen endeavors, where they choose to investigate. And everyone is different to some degree, and some seemingly know more about others. They really don't. I think we all know equally the same amount of knowledge at any given time, because we all draw from the same source. But we can elaborate upon it because we're used to it. We're a plumber, we know a pipe wrench from a screwdriver real well, or a locksmith, a wiser from a quick set. So it seems like, wow, this is an expert here because they know the difference. But it isn't really. The vital part is the togetherness, putting these plumbers and carpenters and locksmiths and everything else together, because that's when you start to build. One piece can't do anything just by itself. It has to be put with other pieces, and I think that's the humor of the Creator in saying, well, you guys take your time. I've got billions of years. You want to fool around here. When you want to get it together and you get serious, get it together. So the excitement or disappointment of meeting people disappear after a while when you just realize that everybody's got something to offer. Everybody's different in their own way, and everybody's a part of the picture. If you're involved with them in any way, they have something vitally to teach you or us. That's the way I look at it. I hate getting stopped on the street by a bum asking me for some change. I mean, one part of me says, oh, not this again. But the other part of me, the wiser part of me, has learned that this guy is bringing me a message. So wake up and give him a little change, or give him some conversation, or give him some time, and then move on, because he's giving me something. And I can't maybe see it at that moment. Maybe I won't see it for years down the road, but there is something that this person's sharing with me that's vital for my growth, or he simply wouldn't be in the picture. Nature doesn't waste things. Man does, the way his idea is, but nature doesn't have any waste. So here I am on the bandwagon. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Ralph Ray. Next.
My name is John Tyson. I live in Sedona right now. I was living in California for a while. So many things have happened in my life since I was a child that it's hard to put into words how my own personal experiences have fit to bring me to this moment in time, except to say that the analogy might be a pinball going through the machine, where once you've struck the lever and engaged everything and the ball starts at the top, eventually it's going to work its way down to the bottom, but along the way it's going to be running into all these other interesting things. But you know before you even start the game that sooner or later it's going to be hitting that point again, and you're going to be able to start all over again with maybe a different way of looking at things. And that's how my life has been. When I was 14, I had a unique experience with my brother, which I'll never forget. And it had to do with a close sighting. And that started me questioning a lot of things. And it wasn't too long after that I was visiting somebody in Minnesota, and I saw a house, a new concept for a home. It was kind of on a pedestal, and it was modular shape, but it looked like some kind of a craft or a saucer on a pedestal, and this was somebody's home. And I remember back then, before ever meeting Ralph, that wouldn't it be neat if not only could you live in something like that, but instead of moving from home to home, wouldn't it be neat if you could just take and move your home somewhere else? And I kind of dismissed that. And then in following my father's work a little bit, him being an artist, he had, toward the end of his life, he had been doing drawings of cities in the sky. And he knew a man named Paulo Soleri, who I met, and some of you are aware of it, Marco Sandri. And part of me became involved in the whole idea of living differently, living harmoniously with, first of all, ourselves, and then each other, and then nature. Because deep down inside I know that that's the only way it works. And that kind of thinking led me to studying and interacting with Native Americans. Because a lot of them today have still retained this kind of thinking. After high school, I didn't want any more formal education because I felt rather intuitively that I'd be getting that anyway through other sources, and I did. And I became acquainted with people like Tesla and a lot of these other names. And it sparked a keen, deep interest in me to follow through with some of their ideas, to maybe stand on their shoulders, so to speak. And why couldn't we bring this into the world today? Why doesn't the world have it today if this was being done so long ago? Some of these alternative energy ideas and some of these new concepts for living. Well, I found out through research that there are some handfuls of communities throughout the world that are studying things and trying to live together harmoniously, and I look upon these as experiments to find out what works and what doesn't, because ultimately these will transpire. This type of living will come to pass. And I always question, why don't we have these things now if the ideas have already been given to us, if the groundwork has already been laid? And that brought me to the other side of the coin. And for a while, I guess you could have called me a fanatic because I tried to expose every little conspiracy that I ever heard of, tried to find out whether these things were true or not. And after a while of that, I came to a point where the only person I was really fighting was myself. And I realized that whatever I see in the world that appears to be negative or not beneficial to the community or mankind as a whole, it has its place, strangely enough. And this gets back to an axiom of the universe that there are tensions throughout the universe on all levels, atomic and stellar. There are tensions between two extremes, both positive and negative, and that these tensions are necessary to work things out. If the tension wasn't there, like stretching out a rubber band, then our experiences would cease to be as we know them. I'm inclined to agree with a lot of things that I've heard people talk about in the past. People that I've had a good rapport with. Ralph seems to be one of them. And I believe that what we're going through are steps to something which we all recognize on a subconscious level as coming to pass. A new understanding of the cosmos is happening right before our eyes. We're in it. We're a part of it, and we can feel it and we can taste it, but we're not quite living it yet. So these new technologies are, I think, in some respects necessary. Not only are they neat and fun, but are necessary so that once we're at that level of understanding, we can then go on to yet another level, a higher level beyond that. And that's kind of where I'm at. I look at the world and I see a lot of people are opening up to new possibilities that they hadn't thought of before. And that's reassurance to me that the general trend or vibration of everything is being raised. And that about does it for me.
You're next in line.
Okay.
Oh.
Want me to hold the time?
Yeah. Goodness. Geez, you know, it's a lot more fun to be behind the camera than it is to be on the camera. I'm Ty Clements, and I'm here because I've had a passion for new technologies. And one of the prayers that I asked was I wanted to help to facilitate the transformation of our planet and to link up the people that had those passions. And I guess I found that the way that I think that will be done is based on relationships, and that it's not the project that's important, because if it's a project, then there's always a new project or whatever. But if we value the relationship, then anything is truly possible. This has been exemplified in technology that's being used in the Mondragon area of Spain, where they've taken 100 companies with a bank over here and entrepreneurs over here and brought the two together, and they've hired the management of the companies, and they've developed 100 companies over the last 50 years, and those companies are now larger than General Motors. and dominate the small appliance field. I feel that we need to get back to basics and simple things, and that through this kind of working together, all of these companies work together based on relationships rather than the goods of the service or the project, and they value the relationship. When this took place in Spain, a Catholic priest said communism and capitalism are two different ways of cutting up the pie, and if Franco has his way, we'll never have a pie. But if we base things on the relationship, then anything is possible. So, God had a sense of humor when he called me Ty, because I happen to tie and connect people. One of the things that I'd like to tell you about part of your family that isn't here today, and a guy by the name of Dr. Bruce Halstead, who's working, and his passion has been to help bring about the health of our planet. And he's a toxicologist, and I have his Vita over there, which is about 80 pages. And he was Dean of Tropical Medicine at Loma Linda University and so forth. And he knows of natural ways, using plants and so forth, to bring our bodies into natural harmony, much like we're talking about bringing people into natural harmony and using that natural harmony. And Frank, Ralph, you're talking about using natural law to fly a hovercraft, or to take alternative energy out of the air that can power anything that we want to power, desalinization plants in the desert, or whatever it might be. Dr. Halstead is 74 years old. He no longer has a license to practice medicine, because in his exuberance to get some new technology out, he didn't know that the company that was bringing in the new technology had brought it in from Puerto Rico under the auspices of a dye, the nutritional formulas. And so he's now a convicted felon, which means that he can no longer practice medicine in our country. He has the World Research Institute in Colton, California. And he has a book that's about this thick that I was showing him this morning, on all the different plants and so forth that can go ahead and make a difference in our life, and can bolster the immune system, and can truly go ahead and solve the problem of cancer, AIDS, and heart disease right now, right here, with products. So he's another part of our family that he's not here today, but know that he's here in spirit. And my hope, after I get home from this meeting, I'm going to go ahead and send him this tape, and I'm going to say to him, Dr. Halstead, there's another group of people here that love you very much, and that are on the same vein. And when you told me earlier this week, and I've got the film that I'm going to share with them as soon as I get it from your wife, of our conversation and your dream about going ahead and not being dominated by the petrochemical industry and the pharmaceutical industries and so forth, but get to a simpler way of life that's we can have sustainable growth on the planet. So I'm here to connect. I'm here to support you. I've got a little piece of it, and my little piece of it's not any better than anybody else's piece. But if we put all those pieces together, we've got a mosaic, the likes of which the world has never seen. And we all know that we're here to serve. And we know that if we'll get out of our own way, that other meetings like this will take place. So that's basically what I have to say. I feel very humbled to be here, and I'm having more fun than I've ever had in my life before. And I'm finding that what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to ooze through this life, and the key is having fun on the trip. And I want to play. The little Ty inside of me says, "Hey guys, I want to play with you guys." So I'm glad to meet up with the rest of my playmates, and I'm looking forward to getting in the sandbox and getting the hands dirty and having a good time. So, thank you, and and we'll pass the baton here.
Okay, you were talking about your research that you've...
Well, I found that, I have always been in business for myself. I started with Time and Liberty magazine when I was a kid, and I learned how to take care of myself. I bought my own bicycle, and I had a paper route, and I bought my own clothes and took care of myself. All the way through life, I've been basically in business for myself. And because of my interest in magnetics and the idea that everything I was looking at around me seemed antiquated or backwards, it didn't seem that I was in the right place at the right time, which should have been reversed. And I finally realized by reversing my views, I could see things more clearly, the way they really are. And in order to reverse it, you have to use your subconscious mind. The conscious mind can't reverse. It just seems to see things linearly. And I don't know, I got into that tangent, but my point was that I work for a while, and then I take my money and then spend it on research and development in my interested field, which is magnetics. And finally, I suppose I ought to put this on tape. Finally, I got a job working for the government, federal government, in a research laboratory in Costa Mesa, California. As a laboratory technician, the name of the company was Advanced Kinetics. Dr. Weinhardt was the director. And this came after my time in the military, learning only how to kill and not getting the engineering school that I kept putting in for. I got out and didn't know what to do, so I had learned how to snorkel and... This is your turn. I'm sorry.
No, Ralph. No.
Well,
This isn't a turn thing.
Right.
That's the one thing that we got to get out of. This isn't a turn thing. Don't wear it years and years and years. I mean, we were doing that. Just talk.
Well, you guys have heard this.
No, I haven't, Ralph.
Oh, you haven't?
I've only heard little bits and pieces
Oh,
of it. And I think it's
okay.
very important.
I haven't heard
You don't go.
We'll get it on tape so I don't have to repeat it.
And it's okay if we have a question to ask Ralph a question.
Oh, yeah,
for clarity, if there's something we want to know a little bit more about him. I hope it's okay with Ralph.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I got into the military and I wanted to go to engineering school, and they kept putting me back in the infantry, and I wound up on Guam, where there was nothing to do but the services to go find bars and fight. The Marines would fight the Navy, and the Navy would fight the Army. And they tear up a bar, and this was their this was really their enjoyment. They'd come in the next morning, oh, I got a hangover, but boy, you should see that bar we wrecked last night. And those guys were laying out on the floor, blood all over. I couldn't believe this. I mean, this was like, no, I don't think so. I think I'm going to pass on this. There must be something else on this island I can do. And I acquired a mask and a snorkel and started going out in my free time and snorkeling in the bays. And I discovered a whole new world under there. I mean, it was just incredible. And my thought processes were completely different. And I no longer had anything in common with those guys, so I had just a very few people that I could talk to about my interests. But I finally got...
I'm curious, why? You said that doing the snorkeling, I mean, was it being down there with the fish, or was it, what was...
Well, I think I was experiencing my own freedom. That it was a choice to be free.
Which you don't have in the military.
Okay.
I mean, I had a similar experience. I just want to take the time. I mean, you can be in a situation, and my situation in the military, I was drafted. It was during Vietnam era. I know Ralph's was in the Korean era. But things happen, and some things happened to me that led me into a whole other alternative. And it's the same type thing that Ralph's saying. I couldn't communicate to most of the guys anymore because their whole world is a different world. A lot of them were there because they wanted to be. So anyways, I just want to cover that. It's the sense of something just happened, and that's what happened to me. Now, Ralph, it was his story.
Yeah, well, that's basically, their ideas weren't seemingly going anywhere. They were going except in circles, because they'd have the same story every morning. I mean, after they'd been to a bar, if they beat up 2 or 3 or 4, it was basically we beat up, or we tore down, or we destroyed this or that. So it was the same story all the time. There was nothing new, and there was nothing what you could call positive about the thing. I mean, they thought it was positive because they came out with only 2 broken arms instead of the 4 disabled limbs or whatever. But what I got from that was the choice that I had of being free of distraction and focusing on things that I wanted to do in my life, which was to explore the unknown so that I could learn it and apply it to my lifestyle, and hopefully find other people that shared the same interests and develop a very comfortable, enjoyable way of life. And so that was interrupted rather abruptly when the Korean War broke out in 1950. They shipped us over. They woke us up in the middle of the night and put us on a boat, and we made the Wonchon landing in North Korea. And that was the most condensed learning of my entire life. In 5 years, I learned probably the equivalent of 5 lifetimes in what killing and maiming and...
Can you add how old you were, Ralph? Because I know you were even underage when you were...
I was 14 years old when I was put in the service.
Whoa.
I was not wanted in my family. My dad was a very successful. He was the head of the William Morris Casting Agency at one time, and he was the head of everything he got into. He became president and so forth. He was a 33rd degree Mason. He was the grand potentate of the Shriners. He was a very busy person, but too busy for the kids in life, which I'm not trying to pass judgment. I'm glad it happened because it gave me the character that's necessary to pursue what I want to pursue. But he kept farming me out to foster homes, and I kept running away and coming back. And he put me in Bellarmine College Prep, the best school you can go to in California at the time. Was where the Crosby kids, in fact, I bunked with the Crosby kids to try and get some kind of education. But he, after promising to come up and see me once in a while on the weekends, never showed up. I decided to run away and go back to see him. Well, he kept farming me out further and further away, so that the distance to get home was not just an hour or two, but several days. Finally, I wound up in Fernley, Nevada, and I was on a ranch farm actually, and I had I learned all the mechanics of running a farm, which is I slept in a bunkhouse and no heating, and we had to break the ice in the bowl in the morning to wash up, and then we had to milk all the animal chores, and the eggs in the separator, etc. And so finally I realized he wasn't giving them the support he had promised them. He was promising so much a month for my care, and he wasn't paying them. So I ran away and ran back to Santa Cruz, where he was the port director and the president of the chamber and head of the development of the greater Santa Cruz area, and I don't know, half a dozen other things. And I called him in the middle of the night, and instead of welcoming me, he chewed me out for coming back, and told me to go back where I came from. Well, to make a long story short, I had to call the police because I didn't know. I woke some people up in the middle of the night to call him, and I didn't know what to do. So they said, "Well, we'll call the police." And they took me down and fed me, and took me down to the jail and said, "No, we're not going to lock the door. You just sleep here until we get a hold of your dad in the morning." Well, they did lock the door, and that scared me. And then finally my dad showed up in the morning and denied that I'd even called him, and acted like, "Well, this is my son here. What are you doing here?" and so forth. And I realized the incapacity that my dad had for honesty. He just could not be honest about what had happened. He really pretended that everything was not as what happened. Well, anyway, I got out of that, and they took me over to his buddy, who was the chief of police. No, he was the sheriff, and said, "Look, we can't have you coming back here all the time, running away. I want you to talk to the sheriff here, and we're going to figure out something." Well, the sheriff had a bunch of mock evidence on his table and said, "Well, we're going to pin you to these crimes unless you decide to go into the service. Your dad wants you to make something of your life, become a military man, and become what his idea of a man was." I said, "Well, I didn't do any of this. This is ridiculous." "Well, we can prove that you did, and we can put you away in reform school, da-da-da-da-da." So they intimidated me to some extent, but I realized underneath this all that I might as well just play it cool, because they couldn't do it anyway because I was only 14 years old. And then my dad came in with a clincher because he was an important man and had the know-how to manipulate records. Came back with the Ford's birth certificate and said, "No, you're going into service." So I went into the service, and I fought it all the way. I had a heck of a time getting through boot camp, and then finally on Guam, and then in Korea, it was a nightmare. It was 75 below zero, and we were trying to live, trying to exist, trying to stay alive in that kind of temperature and everything. And then I was wounded 4 times, and each time I was wounded, I'm supposed to get an R&R. It's supposed to give you a rest and recuperation before going back on the line. But because my outfit was the first into North Korea, they were getting wiped out. And there was only, when I left, there was only 8 of us out of 300 left. But they said continuously, "No, you've got to go back to the line because we have new recruits coming in and your season, so we have to have you there to train the recruits." This was their reasoning. So I had no R&R, and I was really getting upset with this. I had no other reference point but war and fighting and killing and blood and all that stuff. So I don't know. I'll make this short. Finally, when I got out, I decided, when I got back to the States, I went AWOL. There was about 300 of us just went AWOL. And well, that's another story. Basically, I got into hovercraft.
You can get back to Costa Mesa, but I just want to, because when you were mentioned Korea, I do remember that from before, the situation that you were 14, and that is, whatever the lesson that was to be learned there, Ralph, it was definitely to build a lot of strength and character,
Yeah.
and I really feel...
Well, I appreciate my dad for being who he was because he was a catalyst. He was a SOB to the first magnitude, but now I can love him for being who he was, because if he wasn't
You
that
wouldn't
way.
be the person that you are.
You choose the environment you choose and create the world you play in as much as your dad chose it for you. I really believe that. I believe we choose our parents. I believe we choose our friends.
Well, I'm trying to pass this on to my daughter now, in the lessons of you make your own bed and you sleep in it, or whatever. And she's beginning to respond to that. that I'm not going to feed her anymore. I want to love her, and if she's broke, I'll ignore it. I mean, that's just...
You can't blame people around us for being created in our lives because we're creating our own lives.
My mom was an alcoholic, and so I never knew when I came home whether she was going to be drunk or sober, or whether she was going to be yelling at my dad or not yelling at my dad. And I wouldn't like to take people home because I never knew what was awaiting me when I got home. And for a long time, I tried to blank some of that stuff out of my life. And I found that I wouldn't be the sensitive individual that I am today had I not gone through that. And I think what a blessing. I mean, wow, what a blessing. And when my business, my $7.5 million business went down the tubes in a weekend, and I went through personal bankruptcy and corporate bankruptcy and a 25-year marriage, people kept saying, oh, poor Ty. Well, I didn't feel poor Ty. Granted, I didn't want to go through it again. I'm not putting that out there. But what a blessing. What I know today and the person that I am, I was pretty cocky. I mean, I thought, boy, my stuff don't smell at all. And I'm pretty hot stuff, and I like my Mercedes, and I like my big house, and I like all these things. Well, when I didn't have them, I learned that, wow, there's another point of view. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade me for anything. And much like you, I truly believe I'm one of the most blessed men that the planet will ever see. I mean, wow, what God has brought my way has been just such a blessing, and continues to be, because I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I mean, it's all serendipity. I'd started talking to her in Arizona, and then I talked to her in Ashland, Oregon, and we had this long-distance conversation. I didn't see her for, what, a year and a half?
At least a year.
Okay.
We used to talk to each other on the phone all the time, and sharing a lot of
what we were...
people that we knew in common, interests that we had in common, and goals that we had in common. So it's been a real nice, like how, you know, Ralph and I have known each other for a number of years, and it's been by the shop, and you and Ruthie and I, you know, before would all chat and share, and somehow I always knew, like with you, that there was going to be this time when it would all come together. And, you know, years and years ago, and I can remember it so clearly, I woke up one day, and I mean it really was more than waking up, but I realized that someday I longed for these little things to happen in my life. And I was one really understanding geometrics, really understanding, and I mean before I was a year old, I'm not talking about 5, 6 years later. But
well, anybody that was raised in the King Arthur Church, where we should...
Now, share things specifically, because some of us don't even know that.
it's okay, yeah.
You've been intuitive most of your life.
All my life.
Why don't you say who you are?
Oh, I'm John.
I'll finish the Costa Mesa.
I'd like to ask Ralph a question.
Go ahead.
What were the events that led up to you meeting Otis T. Carr? How did you meet him?
Well,
That's what he was at. He was in Costa Mesa, right?
I'm sorry.
No,
That's okay. What
no.
you were? We got off. You were talking.
Basically, I had started a diving business eventually from my experiences, very successfully, from the North California coast to the Southern California coast, and I met my first wife, and we had children. And finally she said, your work is too dangerous, and we were tired of you being away all the time, because I had to go out, and I finally wound up as a research diver for Jacques Cousteau for his U.S. Divers.
Do you know?
Oh yeah.
Do you know who Bruce Halstead worked with?
Well, you were telling me earlier.
He did
co-authored a book.
Co-authored a book with Jacques Cousteau on dangerous and venomous marine animals, and it was actually published by the U.S. Government Printing Office. And I mean, it is a landmark study in toxicology. So I mean, it's interesting that you also ended up being with Cousteau. And as a matter of fact, when you got into the diving, I was down here thinking, well, God, maybe there's some tie that you and I always like to make ties, and I kept thinking about, well, maybe there's some tie here between you and Halstead that you experienced something. Well, it sounds like you have. You've truly gotten to know Cousteau at some point in time.
Well, yeah. In fact, it's a very interesting story.
Let's go back to the question that he answered, and I didn't mean to.
The answer to that was that.
And who is this man that we're talking about at the same time?
Otis Carr. Otis.
Well, he's going to get into that.
Yeah. Anyway, my wife said, you've got to be more at home. You've got to, get a job around town here. And I said, I'm a machine gunner. What do I know? And I've educated myself. I put myself through school, taking subjects that I wanted to learn, et cetera, et cetera. And so she said, well, you're always tinkering and dabbling in science. Here's an ad for a research technician down here at Advanced Kinetics. So I answered the ad, and I walked in at lunchtime, and there was nobody there. They were all on lunch break. So I was walking down the hall, and I walked past Dr. Weinhardt's office, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, looking for a job. And he said, come in. And I sat down. He said, what are your qualifications? What are your credentials? I said, nothing. I don't know. I just need the job. You had a job advertised. He said, what do you think you can do? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, why are you here? And I said, well, I have an interest in science, and but I've learned it from bumblebees and lizards and snakes. And he says, oh, wow, okay, come in and sit closer. So he said that he'd learned much of his background in physics from the same sources that I had, so we had a lot in common. And by the end of the interview, which was about 15 minutes, he says, come in tomorrow morning, I want you on magnetics. I have a magnetic experiment. The guy just left in the middle of the experiment. We want you on that experiment. So it was like, I'm finding out all you have to do is keep setting your table. If you want something, then it'll say, okay, there's no problem. Here's the requirements to get what you want. Put salt and pepper and whatever is necessary into that package, and then the package will be delivered. It's just simple as that. Well, I got my magnetic. Overnight, I became a lab technician in a highly classified secret government research. I had previously gotten a top secret clearance because I worked for Collins Radio, and they had given me a top secret clearance because of the paperwork we were doing for the government.
Arthur Collins was a friend of my dad's.
Is that right? A lot of parallels. So anyway, to make a long story short, this experiment was working with magnetic fields, and I had a giant electromagnet that was attached to an oscilloscope, a high-speed Polaroid camera, and a cathode ray tube, which is nothing but a television tube that fires electrons. And my job was to force this electron through this magnetic field from A to B without deflection. It could not go to the left, to the right, or to the positive, to the negative. It had to go through. The
Ralph, was the magnet, was it horseshoe shape and it went through it, or was it the two ends?
It was just two half magnets.
Okay, and you were going where the fields were pushing. You have a positive and negative field like this. You were forcing this way through it. Okay.
To try and get the electron
Without the magnetic field to make it veer either way.
Right.
Okay.
fast enough, strong enough, or whatever it took. And they said, we've got Boulder Dam behind us, so you can use it. And I kept turning up the power. They said, keep getting until we get that electron through the field. Because at the time they were working with magnetic shields around rockets, and they wanted to find out a way to navigate these magnetic rivers in space. And so they had to find a way to get through these fields. Well, humans' ways, if you excuse the expression, is to force things. If
right.
They can't get it one way, they'll force and try another way. And I had learned from my experience with natural law, which dealing with creeks that meander instead of straight lines like viaducts and so forth, that nature always pulses things. There's always an ebbing and a flowing, etc., etc. And nothing is forced in nature. It all happens by a natural law. One thing allows the other thing to happen. So I was taking these pictures and turning them in every day, and it was my experiment was about $4,000 a day. That's what it cost to run my experiment. On the next bench, they were working on levitation. They were using a fancy coil called an igleotron, and they were about $400 a copy. It was just a steel core with copper windings around it, and they'd take a steel ball, turn the coil on, and levitate the steel ball for 8 minutes, and then burn up the coil and go get another one, and that was costing about $4,000 a day. And this was back in the 50s. And then there was other things, lasers and everything else we were working on. But just those two experiments, I started looking at it a little more closely and realized that we were kind of spinning our wheels. That there must be an easier way than this, because I was getting bored every day. Because I could never get this, no matter how much power, I could never get this electron through the field. So, and these guys could never get this steel ball higher than a few inches or 8 minutes and start all over. They're going in circles. So I went home, I'd gone to garage sales, and I'd gotten some televisions and stereos and taken just the magnets out of the television and built my own little, now this experiment that I was working on was like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 to set it up. Just the plus the camera, plus the oscilloscope, etc. It was about $150,000 setup. I duplicated the thing out of stuff I'd gotten from garage sales for under $100 and set up the whole thing. And I had the electron gun and I had everything ready, and only the difference that I wanted to apply was this pulsing technique, or this breathing, allowing it to meander instead of going in a straight line trying to force it. So I spiraled the pulse. I just pulsed it. Instead of trying to force it, I pulsed it like tachyon energy, or the definition of tachyon energy.
How did you effect the actual spiral?
Well,
how did you know you were spiraling it?
It spiraled itself.
Oh, it did?
By pulsing, it goes in a natural curve. Everything is prone to curve. If you don't force it, it always starts to curve. So by pulsing it, it started its curve and its rotation and went right through the field. The first, second, third, and 50th time that I tried it, it went through the field. So I said, well, there's my footsteps in the sand, that I'm on my way in this life. You know, this is where my endeavor is, etc. So then I took a 15-inch woofer speaker and put it on the floor, and I took a ping pong ball eventually, after many experiments, and found that, well, I had an audio amplifier that I hooked up to it, and I found by varying the frequencies that the sound waves eventually, I couldn't hear a thing. It was like 27,000 cycles per second. This ping pong ball sat there just like a beach ball on a column of water, forever. It stayed there overnight. I went to bed and I woke up in the morning.
So you were doing it with vibrational frequency, sound, and they were doing it with electricity, which is a frequency, but they were doing it with a rhythm.
They were doing it, we were using like 50,000 volts, oh no, 100,000 volts of electricity to try to, we'd charge up the capacitors and then let it go, and we'd hit this poor little electron in the fanny with 100,000 volts, trying to get it to go through the field.
But the guy next to you that was doing the ping pong ball, the guy next to you that was doing the ball deal, they were burning out these coils, and you were making it happen with, they were doing it with a lot of current in a coil thing, and you were doing it just with
sound waves.
They were using the sledgehammer method.
Yeah.
If it don't fit, force it.
That's right. Yeah.
So to wind the story down, I got really excited and I took Polaroid pictures and I wrote up the experiment like I had been used to doing at work. And felt like when I walked into work that day, I felt like, boy, I've got it made the rest of my life because this is why I'm here. And I walked into Dr. Weinhardt's office and said, I think I'm onto something here. I want to show you this. And so he said, okay. So I showed him and told him and so forth and told him I set one up for him. And he surprised me. He said, Ralph, I know. He says, I know it's that simple. He says, I've studied the same as you have about natural law. But this system you're working in here isn't based on natural law. We're based on funding from the government. And we're not here to find answers. We're here to keep looking for answers. And it shocked the hell out of me. I just couldn't believe I was on the right planet. I mean, like, I could not believe, and I had no direction to go then. That was my life spent in what? The guy was telling me it doesn't fit here.
Can I ask you a question, Ralph? Since then, why? Why did he say that? What have you concluded? Why? Or at that time, what did you feel he said this for, and why do you now feel that?
Why he said it?
Yeah. Why that is the way they were doing things.
Oh, because the monetary system that we have is the only system allowed to have been allowed to develop. And in and through and all around the monetary system is power. I mean, this is a whole power.
It finances people. It finances,
Finance.
and the government finances. Do you think at that time somebody else was doing your experiments and proceeding with them while they were doing this thing and just it was like window dressing?
Sure, I found in my own personal experimentation that parallel lines meet at infinity, to quote somebody, I don't know. In other words, wherever you're working, if you look across to related fields, somebody else is doing it too. So I'm sure if I, in my own limited capacity as a crippled war veteran, if you will, that didn't know very much, could discover these things, people with the equipment and the money and so forth.
This is kind of irrelevant, what I was really asking. It's really irrelevant, but it's just a question. Was the government, do you think, carrying on your type of experiment on another parallel somewhere else, and this was just like window dressing?
Well, let me tell you what happened, and maybe you can.
Because I feel, I've always had a knowingness that that is what was going on. You know, there's always, look at this hand, because over here, this is where we're doing it, okay? You know, and there is the funding part, and that's the whole money thing, okay? But and it's not conspiracy, it's just the way they operate. It's a Fabian thing, the word is Fabian. It's like making appearances, this is what's happening, because over here we're doing, and people do it because they don't want anybody else to have their technology, or, you know, whatever the reasons are. Doesn't have to be true. Okay, go ahead. What are you going to say?
Well, when he said this, I was really shocked. And then he said, well, I'm going to have, he put it in a shredder and shredded these photographs and everything. Just shredded them up and said, go back to work. Forget it. Don't talk to anybody about this. And I was numb. I couldn't believe that this was happening. I found something here. I mean, if I could do this with $25 worth of equipment, there's a valid principle here that should be investigated by this company that I'm working for. And he said, and maybe that's the tip-off, I know it's that simple, but see that maybe he knew something that he wasn't relating to me. I don't really know. I mean, at that time, I never thought about it until just now. But I went back to work and I became very bored with I was falling asleep with this job of just sitting there putting in 8 hours, burning up company, government, taxpayers' money. So I finally quit. And the roof came down at the house. My wife said, well, you've got children, well, you can't quit, da-da-da-da-da, what are you going to do? And I just started walking the beaches, trying to make some sense of everything. And I guess I went into meditation and prayer and every other thing I could think of to find out some kind of a guidance system, because I was completely lost. I couldn't believe this is happening. And then I started running into people that said, oh, that's not unusual. I know some other people that have had the same thing happen to them, and some other people over here. Let's come on to one of our meetings and meet these people and talk. So I did. And they knew of Otis Carr working in Oklahoma City to develop this spacecraft that on free energy or zero gravity principle. And they said, we're going to bring him out here so that you guys can meet. And he is being criticized and ostracized and sabotaged and everything at this point, because he was about to unveil the simplicity of zero gravity. And he had many models ready to go to show this principle, many different things, and they were all systematically stopped. He was not allowed to develop anything in Oklahoma City. So,
How was he stopped?
He had one at one point that had mercury in the neutrons. It had amounts of mercury. Mercury was used as a facilitator to acquire zero gravity, and that the night before he was to demonstrate this, in the warehouse, somebody had got in and busted all these neutrons and spilled the mercury all over the floor and everything. So then the health department came in and condemned the building because there was radiation, mercury vapors, etc., etc. So it was an incident that happened that stopped the development at that point. So Carr came out at the request, and this group that I joined at that time was called the Understanding. It was Daniel Fry, I think, started it in California. So they called him out, and we met, and he brought his entourage with him. He had 6 scientists. He had a physicist and an engineer, and I don't know, there's about six people that he brought with him. And then there was me, and we came together like we'd always been together. I knew where they were coming from, and they knew where I was coming from, like forever. I mean, there was no end to our depth. So the Understanding people said, well, we got to get you out of here because they don't want you guys or anybody like you around right now, the monetary system. Because what we were advocating was there's no money in it. I mean, you know.
It takes away their king of the hill attitude with your petroleum-based, energy systems.
Why do you say that there was no money in it?
Well, their perception.
Because and this goes back to the days of Tesla with his with the Tesla coil and beyond, where you can stick a rod at certain angles in the ground 30 feet and into the air 30 feet and draw energy right out of the air. You don't need wires coming from dams and everything to give you electricity.
Yeah, I've done minor experiments that prove that very thing that he's saying, putting rods into the ground, and I've measured voltage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once the craft is started, there is a spectrum of, they call it electricity, but it breaks down into a spectrum. I believe it's like a rainbow. There is a spectrum of that electro force that once the motor is started mechanically, a very small amount of energy is used. Once it's in balance and harmony, it can use this other natural energy. So it is cost-free. You're not looking at going to the gas station pumping gas. So when they say no money, I mean, who's going to be collecting the money? Who's going to be running the meters? Who's going to be doing anything, because it doesn't cost anything to run these things.
Is this something that Tesla basically developed and then was shot out of the saddle because he...
Not specifically in this area. I mean, yeah, he for his development of electricity was shot out of the saddle because his methods would have allowed the freedom of use without cost.
They
Or
were
a
well,
very minimal cost of the initial installation of the
they
equipment.
were well aware of it. It was a choice between do all the money that was invested by the people that had the big wire companies and the that was an up and coming thing. That was how electricity traveled, on wires. Now, in order to go with Tesla's idea, there wouldn't be no more wires. Okay,
Same
so
with communications.
the Morgans and whoever owned the big companies that produced
Vanderbilt.
the massive amount of wires and capacitors, whatever that may be.
J.P. Morgan at the time was the backer behind Westinghouse and Edison. He backed both companies. And they acquired the services of Tesla in both companies to develop their dynamos, et cetera, et cetera. And
Otis Carr also studied under Tesla, correct?
he worked for 3
Okay.
years with Tesla.
So that's a connection, another connection.
And Tesla was called in by J.P. Morgan one day. I mean, I don't know the exact time, facts, etc., but this is basically what happened. He was called in by J.P. Morgan, and Morgan said, "Sit down, Tesla, I want to talk to you. Now, you've got a couple of ideas here, and I want to hear about them." And Tesla said, "Well, I've got a lab set up near Denver. It was actually in Colorado Springs, and I have already produced the effects of transporting electrical power without wires from one point to another, and we can go through the earth, around the earth, or any which way we want to go with electrical power without using wires or telephone poles." And J.P. Morgan said, "Well, that's your lumber industry and your copper industry down the tubes. If we accepted that, then you'd put too many people out of jobs." So basically, J.P. Morgan, being a businessman and an entrepreneur or whatever, and a heavy investor in industry, said, "Well, no way. We can't have free energy. There's no money in it." So they made a choice at that point to develop the monetary system based on jobs and cutting down trees and digging in for copper, etc., instead of going the other way. How do we get into that?
Well, we got into that because you were talking about the group. Otis T. Carr came with his entourage, his group of scientists, and then you met with them and you were saying, and these people that have brought him there, and then you came together and said, "We got to get them out of here. I mean, you got to go find a place to do this." So that's
they put us up at Lake Arrowhead, California, in one of the members' cabin, and they kept us there for about 2 weeks, and then they found us a laboratory in Hesperia, California, Apple Valley, where we could start developing our ideas of the hovercraft, or the zero gravity ideas. So we went down to Hesperia and started our laboratory and started our warehouse and our research.
Were you there, Ralph, the opening day when he gave the speech to people in Hesperia, or when he brought them in? Were you actually there that day when?
Yeah.
Because we have that on tape.
Really?
Oh yeah, the tapes you have, we have the Otis. That's on tape. When he met the people from Hesperia, they came
the
down.
audio tapes.
Right, not on video. We have it on audio, but.
I didn't think they had video then.
Yeah.
And I just wanted you to know that, Tyler, because we do have those tapes, and you can hear Otis Carr, and he's
Actually,
speaking, and
yeah.
this was a big thing. They had, I guess, a good-sized warehouse there, and go ahead and explain it. You tell us from my witness.
You're doing great. I mean, hey, you weren't even there, but you're...
No, I wasn't.
Well, just like Steve said, it was a monumental thing for free energy at that time, because it was just about to be born again on planet Earth. And through our research, we found that it was always here, but through a series of accidents and neglects, man has lost that technology and lost the brain power to realize that he'd lost it even. He became crippled into using techniques that were terribly limited, like sending electricity through the wires for hundreds of miles instead of just tapping it right out of the air. So we worked and developed the hovercraft in Hesperia, Apple Valley, and
How long did you work on it, Ralph? How long were you? Do you remember roughly?
about 6 months, I think, was all the time that I was with, from the beginning and the breakup of the system was about 6 months.
Why was there, well, you say.
Well,
What kind of functions? What kind of things did you do, Ralph? Just briefly. I'm curious. I mean,
well, I was kind of a and working in that caliber of with Carr, he was an unlimited, unconditional person, and just to be around him, you couldn't limit your thinking or limit your abilities. So every one of us was doing different things. I was doing engineering work. I was doing designing work. I was going to the store for coffee. I was doing a lot of different jobs simultaneously. But I was basically in on the researching of the craft and its capacity to levitate. And so, let's see, what should I say there? We were in operating these craft. We found that there was an electrical corona or a discharge on the outer rim of the craft that were exciting the people of Apple Valley. I mean, they thought they were flying saucers all over the place. So there's no way, because when you slow the vibratory rate down to a certain point and it comes back into the atmospheric conditions or the air, the oxygen ignites or creates a corona, and so these things would be brilliant in the sky, and people were seeing them, and even in daylight they were brighter than the sun, and reporting UFOs. So we got a lot of...
Ralph, were these models, or were they
They were
manned?
models.
Could you
Okay,
control them?
Models, yeah, controlled models.
Was this done out in the desert area, or was it done at the plant right there?
No, it was it was basically done at the plant, but we had a 65-mile range that we, used to...
How big were these models?
Oh, well, let's see. I think the smallest one was about 3 feet in diameter. And we had 6-footers and 12-footers, and eventually we had a 45-footer, 2 45-footers.
Were either of the larger craft fully completed as far as the outer skin and the inside compartment for persons?
Well, we never had all the creature comforts. We didn't have padded walls, with leather and so forth. But they were quite comfortable for the experiments that we were running. And I guess I might as well, elaborate on the experiments and put that in here too while I'm at it. It's difficult now because when you're working on a project that intensely and it's of a nature that's not in with the everyday things, it's hard to relate them to the everyday things because it's different. And all I can tell you is Carr said, now where we're going now is beyond time. We're going into what Einstein termed the fourth dimension, but it is multidimensional, and there's 12 dimensions to a system, and we're bouncing back and forth all the time, but we're not realizing it. We're only realizing 1, 2, and 3 dimensions. So
Talking about right here as our own being is sitting
right here, yeah.
Okay.
And he says, you're not going to do anything in these experiments that you're not already doing. What you're going to do is realize what you're doing and realize what you're capable of. That there is no limits to what you can do. But you can't have any fear, because fear will shut the door on these experiments. The minute you have a fearful thought, it short circuits the system. So your belief in your deity or whatever God, whatever, it has to be absolute. You have to be willing to go through anything completely. You can't think it. You have to accept the fact that you're more than you think you are all the time. So, so before we went into an actual experiment, Carr would sit up till 3 or 4 in the morning briefing us on these things. Now, things he knew intuitively, or he'd known from working with Tesla, that were natural laws. And that's all he was explaining. He said, miracles are nothing but natural laws working that people don't understand yet. And that when you understand them, then they're no longer miracles. But, so what we're going to be doing is going further into this miracle realm or whatever, and producing them, producing these effects. Well, let's see. He said that what happens is we are already everywhere and no place at the same time. It's just our ideas that create events of travel and motion and so forth. That the universe is already in motion and standing still simultaneously. It's very hard to grasp that concept, but it's already there. So when you get into this experiment, you are going to be, you are going to realize many of yourselves, plural. You will recognize many of yourselves that you're not recognizing now with just your brain, just your conscious mind, because all it's interested in is keeping the body alive. So, what that came to mean was in the experiments that I experienced.
Talking about in the craft, sitting in the craft, firing it up.
Firing it up.
And the craft, the system worked, he used on spinning discs, is that his system?
Yeah.
With electromagnets around it, it created this vibrational frequency around the outside of the craft.
Yeah, there was a wheel spinning one direction, a wheel spinning the other direction, and the neutrons were set
at an angle.
At an angle in these, well, I think he's got a picture of it here.
If you can zero in on the picture.
Yeah.
We can provide pictures if somebody wants to see them with the tape.
We got a lot of pictures.
Okay, let's get a shot of that picture real quick. Just hold it.
Just get it right side up.
Oh, do I have it upside down?
This is a Hollywood production, of course, guys.
Yeah.
You know, we could go in the other room where it's more comfortable
Where?
to sit in here.
Well, I don't
If
know.
these chairs are...
You got it, don't you?
Well, okay, I'll just finish this segment.
Oh,
Okay.
I don't mind, but I just wondered if everybody
I'm
was
okay.
sitting fine.
I'm all right.
Oh, okay, as long as everybody's okay.
Are you?
No.
Do you need a chair? You want to bring over another chair? Would it be comfortable if you had another chair?
No, I get fidgety sitting too long.
Okay.
Let me finish this
That's all right.
thing.
No, it's fine. I'll just get up and stand. That's all I have to do is just get up and stand. You know I can't sit too long at a time.
Well, so what I began to realize was there was no beginning or end to me, or to any of us. But I was beginning to realize it. And a lot of people around me, because they were not exposed to these kind of experiments, were not awake enough to realize them. So I couldn't talk about them. I couldn't.
This is how you felt after you'd experienced the flight.
Yeah.
How did it, in your own words, what was it like? That's what I would like. If you could explain that, and you can do it any way you can. No. They fired it up and it started, was there a hum? Did you feel something?
Well, there was 3 of us on board, and we were pre-briefed and given notepads and things to do. And we went, okay, this is a little difficult to explain because it is different. But it was like we got on board and fired it up, and they said, okay, you're going down range.
Which meant what?
Downrange.
Okay. You mean you were
When you
told?
were downrange. And I know that's not what happened, right, Ralph?
Were you told from an outside observer that you were going downrange?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had voice communications, and
Was
so
this a
they-
radio or?
radio, like walkie-talkies, whatever they, I don't know what they used in those days compared to walkie-talkies. They said, okay, now when you get there, you're to get out of the craft and pick up some rocks, put them in your pocket, take some grass and eat some grass and do some different things on this list. Because when you get back, you won't believe you've been anywhere. You won't believe you've even moved. So I couldn't understand that when this was all pre-briefing.
Yeah, he's briefing you like you said.
But when the actual experiment happened, it was like somebody pulled all the stops out of my my limited capacity to see, and it was like I could see forever. I could see everything. I mean, I could see conceptually. I could probably go through the whole book of encyclopedia in less than 5 seconds in my brain. I mean, it was just an incredible, like everything was simple. There's nothing complicated. And, but to us, the three of us sitting there, we said, okay, all right, let's go. and nothing seemed to happen. We didn't seem to move. We didn't have any G-force, no acceleration or nothing. We were just sitting there.
That's why it seemed like you didn't go anywhere, right?
And they said, okay, now get out of the craft. Well, we thought we were at the same place we got on at. And I said, oh, what? Something must have gone wrong. So we got out of the craft, and we were 65 miles away from where we started. We were downrange at this prescribed point. And the way we got there was very interesting. The navigational system, or whatever you want to call it, was like a gyroscope of multicolors, like no limits to the colors. You could take red and dissect it to 10,000 reds, and blue to 10,000 blues. It was a compass in the center of the craft, and it was like, well, it was like there was 365 colors.
This was what it looked like actually as a physical object without,
It was like it was a crystal, really.
Okay.
But it had 365 colors to it. We'll say from infrared to ultraviolet, round in a circle. So the area that we were going to was aquamarine. I mean, that was that vibration of the frequency of that area was vibrating at the same frequency of aquamarine. So in a sense they put it on aquamarine and said, okay, get out of the craft, you're there. And so we got out. In what seemed to be about 15 minutes, we went through these experiments. We picked up the rocks and put them in our pockets, we took the grass, etc., and did all these things, and got back in the craft. And no sooner than we sat down, they said, okay, now get out of the craft, you're back home. And it was crazy. We got out of the craft and we were back where we had started. And the time this had happened was like in 3 to 5 seconds in the time they started and ended the experience on a stopwatch. It was very incredibly fast time. To us, it seemed like 15 or 20 minutes had gone by. And then the minute we started getting out of the craft, our brain power started leaving us again. It was like we could see forever, and then all of a sudden, it was like a dream closing down, where we could no longer remember. And then when we finally got down to the debriefing, we doubted that the whole thing existed. And they said, look in your pockets. And we pulled these damn rocks out. And they said, the brain brain will constantly try to keep itself alive and away from all these other outside influences except itself. It's a guardian, really. It's taking care of...
For the physical form
For the
itself.
physical form.
Ralph, how many times have you told this story, actually?
Half a dozen, maybe.
It's been how long has it been since did you ever tell Ruth this specifically?
No.
See, Ruth, I know he told Jonna, and I don't know if
She's heard
this, because this is something, I mean, you just don't tell a lot of people, but, you know, I don't have the whole mechanics side of it, but that's real to me. This is real to me. I mean, when you talk about, and it's wonderful. And John has talked about the color spectrum, and, you know, things like that. That is the vibrational frequencies. They all match a certain color spectrum, and these crafts will glow in that color depending on where they're at.
This is why I guess I asked Ralph what were you going to do.
We're all going to see this next weekend.
It was,
He's here, so it was enjoyable. It was just something that was really a...
but no, it's the unknown.
The fear of the apprehension.
Yeah, of the unknown.
All it is.
Well, there are so many weird things going on in Planet Lucy. I mean,
Right.
I see that too, you know, we all see that. And you don't know whether it's going to be a bunch of these borderline question marks that you're going to be sitting around the table with, or if it's going to be somebody that you're going to feel fairly comfortable with or can tolerate the input or whatever. And, you know, I've been in rooms where I thought, I think it's time for me to go home now. And there's other times where I didn't understand, or I didn't really relate to a lot of it, but it was okay because I believed it, I could handle it, I just let it be. It wasn't really a part of my life, but I could feel comfortable. Now this is very much a part of my life, so I can feel very comfortable
Oh,
with
I
it.
can, all of this has been said today. I can, I feel comfortable around it.
I think the main thing to keep in perspective is this is God's natural universe.
Yeah.
Right.
Any of these things we experience, and there's nothing in them that are harmful.
That's what I learned from it, that there's nothing to fear, not even fear.
In fact, it's...
And the more you work with nature, the less harm there is. The more you go against
So how many
nature,
trips did you
natural
take with them? Or how many experiments
Well, there
were
was
you...
3 experiments that I remember, vividly, fairly vividly. And the end result, and as of to this day, I didn't get paid much money. I was working on a limited salary because we had limited...
Sure, the whole thing.
But what I got was my mind has never closed. I mean, I'm still operating in more than one world simultaneously. I'm always, and very comfortably, I can operate in 2 or 3 different modes at the same time. But the most valuable thing I learned from that is that everybody's trying to get someplace, and the thing is, we're already there.
It's here.
We're already there, and what I realized in these experiments was it's the awareness that we have to concentrate on and who and what we really are. We're unlimited beings experiencing a limited capacity because we're told not to use our imagination.
And our agreement is
It's a
so
very
strong.
limited reality.
Our agreement is so strong not to perceive of those, of what you... I mean, you did it, you actually did the experiment, came back, and nothing happened. When in fact it really did.
Yeah. And I know it did. See, that's what I meant by 2 worlds. I know beyond any, there's not even a shred of doubt. I know it happened. My brain to this day still wants to, it still wants to question it, and I ignore it because I know it did happen. And I had those rocks and the grass stains and...
You had no visual. Did the craft have any visual out of it? Any windows of any sort?
Yeah, it had some windows. I don't even remember looking at
them, because it was so quick, obviously, because you sit on the stopwatch, it was so many seconds.
Yeah. And the way Carr explained this is we went in and out of time.
That's just what I was going to ask, if you didn't go out of time.
Yeah. And he says that's simple. That's the 4th dimension.
That's the easy
Which
part.
takes us back to...
One of the things that happened with Dr. Marlo Morgan working with the Aborigines is that she went ahead and they asked God, they started the day and they said, we'd like to show you, Dr. Morgan, what it's like to do a healing, how we do it. And so they said, if it's in the best interest of all concerned and it's God's will, we would like to give you a demonstration project, and so forth. So they didn't know whether it was going to happen or not, but there was an Aborigine that fell down an embankment and broke his leg, and the bone was sticking out. And what they ended up doing is they went down to the person, they lifted him up, they started a chant, and at the end of the chant, it was like a yell, and this was a load-bearing bone in the leg that was protruding out from the skin. And when they let out this yell, the bone just sort of magically went back into position. And she said, I didn't see any traction being used, and I was very close to him. And then the medicine woman of the tribe had gone ahead and had a skin that she had collected when any woman had her period and there was a clot. They would go ahead and put the clot into this bag, and they'd save it. And so they took out a tarry substance and literally tarred the break, the incision, and so forth together. And that night, everybody was holding this man's head, and she wanted to see if there was any fever and so forth. And so she took one of the spots, and she was holding this Aborigine's head, and as she held the head, he looked up at her and winked, and she knew that he didn't have any fever. The next day, it was completely healed, and the man was walking on it. And they said they have they don't understand time, and healing has no consequence of time. It's only because of our perception of time.
Yeah.
Okay, and within 3 days, the tarry substance had chipped away, and there was a scar there. But this entire thing healed overnight. And this man woke up the next morning, and he was walking around and doing everything, and he wasn't even sore. So this is that it's us that have the consequences of time. The Aborigines have
and not just that. We believe that if you break a leg, there could be pain, there could be problems, but it doesn't have to be that way. Mentally, you can negate anything like that, and you can create a perfect limb again, and so it is.
It's really funny. One of the people, I heard one of the interviews that Dr. Morgan had, and they said, would you ever go ahead and practice medicine again? And she said, yes, I would. But knowing what I know now, I couldn't practice it in the same way, and I would probably have my license lifted. So what I would like to do is find those holistic people that are the doctors that are working in this area. And she said, I'm very much into Curlian photography, because in Curlian photography you can see the difference between a mental problem and a physical problem. And you may clear the problem on a physical form, but if you don't clear it on a mental form, you can still see the anger that you're holding at your mother-in-law, or your anger that you're holding at, with my case, it was my alcoholic mom, and so forth. And you can actually see those differences and the variations between the physical and the mental. And these are new paradigms. These are new stretchers.
Ralph, I have a question. With Carr, his plans were, and at that time, this was all the proceeds so he could go to the moon on his birthday or March something?
December 7th.
Okay, they were supposed to go December 7th, yeah. Was he on schedule with that? Did he know where he was going, or?
Well, no, that schedule never was on schedule. It was an idea to get on schedule with it, but that one never got on schedule because we had time delays in the other things that we were doing, and there was a lot of distractions, and there was a lot of other things that we had to take care of, and so that never really got on schedule.
So do you have any questions about, because he was explaining the navigation guidance system on this thing. Can you shed some understanding of that?
It was just a giant crystal ball, really, and it was a sphere. It was it was just like a crystal ball.
Right, and where did the colors?
Well, it was like there was no colors, except there was a white light. in the center,
So,
and then that radiated out to the colors all the way around.
in this ball then, it really what they were doing was using electromagnetics to divide the spectrum rather than, it wasn't like a crystal as we think of it, you put it up in the window, the sun comes in, you've got a rainbow. You're talking about an entirely different...
Well, in a way it was like that, but in a way it was kind of seemingly more than that too, because it was just a white light in the center, and I don't know what this must have came from underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just, it was beautiful. I mean, it was a beautiful thing because the reds would just go from red to orange to yellow. You know, they just
Was this with the rate of spin that would do that?
No, it was just sitting. Nothing moved
Okay.
according to us. I mean,
Could you hear any motion?
huh?
You didn't feel
According to us, we didn't
feel any
think that we moved, but
I guess what I'm asking, Ralph, is when this thing did its thing, was the wheels turning, or would it be doing that when you went into this, when you sat down in there and it was there in front of you, I guess, and nothing had been kicked on?
Okay.
Was it just a plain
It was like
ball?
it was sitting there in front of us like this, and all these colors were there, like. But it's like the area chosen for us to go to was the equivalent to the frequency of aquamarine. In other words,
Was it the area chosen, or was it the distance to be traveled? The distance to be traveled would give you the same thing. You can actually create the
might have
force
been
field in the same direction. That's what I believe it was. Because the distance to be traveled could be created based on like a 2 seconds at a certain frequency. You would then wind up approximately 65 miles away. Or if it was set at a certain frequency, it would be 150 miles
So that's the
away.
mathematics of that.
Right, so that's what I believe was occurring there.
well, all that I remember was that aquamarine became very beautiful and obscured the other colors for the time that we were experiencing it. Just
How do you think, Johnny, do you have any, how did they get to aquamarine? Was it based on a certain amount of rate of spin, do you
That
think?
is pulse, vibrational pulse, because if you've got your centripetal and centrifugal forces going, and you're then creating a 0 point. The 0 point can stay at 0 point, and you can be there and be there and be there. But in order for you to go somewhere, you've got to have some kind of a principle that, and I really understand what you're saying when you're in all places at the same time. In this principle, where you're technically you teleported rather than transported, you do need to have a pulse mechanism. Kind of when you were saying, when you shot the electron out to go between the magnets, if you try to force it, it's not going to work. Well, anything stressed will go in a straight line. Anything non-stressed, you're going to be able to guide it. You're going to have a guidance system. So that's, the only thing that I was...
Ralph, did they have anybody to note what happened to the craft?
yeah, see, we had
they
a whole ring of observers.
Okay. Did they see the
Documenting
craft
this
physically, or
Yeah, well, here's what happened on the ground according to what we got later. We got in the craft, and it levitated off the ground just a few feet.
Mhm.
And I can remember a humming, it was like bells ringing, just like, what do you call them?
chimes?
Not katydids.
Crickets?
Yeah.
Not crickets.
No, that whirring.
Locusts.
Yeah.
Locusts?
Yeah. Yeah.
When they get their wings together.
Sounds like a whooshing kind of wind noise, but more
The
than
wing?
that, yeah.
It was a real...
Oh, the cicada?
Cicada bug? Cicadas?
Cicada?
One of those
They're called
guys
cicadas.
that rub their wings together, and you can hear them in the trees. And
I always thought they were mating when they did.
they could have been.
You thought they were what?
Mating.
Oh.
keep on with the story, Rob.
Well, I can remember that. It was very. It was a very neat sound, really. I mean, it was very comfortable sound. It was just very, very nice. But to the observers, we were sitting there, and then it's like we just disappeared.
Which is what happened.
And then we reappeared in just a matter of seconds.
You reappeared right there.
At the
Now,
same
people
spot.
that were down line, did any of them see you in between those 2 points?
People down line saw us. And
When
When they
documented.
arrived.
When you arrived down line. But I'm saying, do you
How about
did
in
anybody
between-
say?
in between
I don't
point
think
A and B?
anybody saw you in between because it doesn't travel linear.
No. No, there wasn't any speed attached to it. That's what's difficult in explaining it to
Oh,
a
no.
layman.
That's why it makes more
There's no
sense
speed.
when you go back to the color mechanics, you know, why, and when we first talked about this, where it's real clear it's teleport rather than transport. And they can still be adjusted, I believe, with the magnetics to make them transport vehicles rather than teleport vehicles.
Right, where they'll actually go to the place, you know, in third-dimensional space.
Kind of more like the Jetson vehicles, you know, when it's up and, you know, you actually see them travel, but what you were in...
He didn't
was-
travel in third-dimensional space, right?
Right.
He went in and out. He went out.
You moved to the 0 point and then reappeared at a new 0 point.
Mm-hmm. And the 0 points exist everywhere simultaneously.
We are all 0.
Yeah, you just like
Our
wormhole.
bodies
wormhole
are
calls.
multiples of 0 points. Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, it's
It's great, Ralph.
well, now I want to go beyond what Carr did. And I want to, you know, make these things a reality because it was exciting. I mean, what I...
When was this?
Huh?
When was this?
1950s, about 54, I think. 55.
What happened to Carr?
Well,
And why did the experiment stop?
well, in a nutshell, because people were becoming aware of what we were doing and so forth, the people that were out to stop Carr, that represented the monetary system, that didn't want the development of wireless anything to happen,
Wireless
decided-
energy.
wireless energy to happen, decided to put a stop to it, so they went through the channels that they had available, which was federal government, because the FBI showed up out there and so forth, and just stopped the operation, just totally shut it down. And we
They
were all
take anything?
dispersed. Huh?
They take anything?
Yeah, they took the giant, the larger craft that we had was transported to Alamoso, New Mexico, and put underground.
Alamogordo,
Whatever it is. And it wasn't until years later, a few years ago, in Prescott, Arizona, there was a professor coming through giving a lecture at the college, and I went to see it that night. It was when the Freedom of Information thing had been released, where he had all these documents of things that we weren't aware of going on. And he had just come from Alamogordo or whatever, and because of his credentials, he had the rights to areas that had not been exposed before. And he said he got to go down in these chambers and see all these experimental things, or all these things that were down in these chambers that were not known to the general public. And he saw Carr's craft, the OTCX-1, in one of these cavities down underground. So it kind of confirmed where that thing was at. So.
And they're not doing anything with it.
Well, yeah, they tried. They tried to make, this is interesting. They tried to make military vehicles out of them, to make war machines out of them. But the pure nature of the craft is nonviolent. There's no way you can't harm anybody with the craft. You can't do anything that's harmful. You'll just, and to illustrate this, from what I hear, the experiments that were run, they tried to mount weapons, everything from bullets to lasers, and fire them from this craft. And what would happen, the instant and the amount of energy that was used to fire the projectile or the energy out of the craft would hit the outer edge of the craft and come back and blow them
You mean the outer edge, meaning the field, the outer field,
outer
cannot
field.
penetrate that
Like
field.
a force field right there, and it come back.
It came back and
Bounced around in the field.
it destroyed their experiments.
Yeah.
And they were never successful in trying to make any. There's no way you can use these for war machines. There's nothing. There's no way. And the magnetic fields in themselves is very interesting because you can never have a collision. It's like a computer, you know. It's doing 1,000 times a second what takes us, you know, minutes or maybe hours to compute. The computer, well, the magnetic fields can sense anything in its path and change its vibratory rate or its field of direction or whatever, far beyond ever getting into a collision point.
Well,
So
it's like two
can't have
magnets
any-
that, you know, if they are opposing magnets and you try to push them together, there's that bouncy kind of feeling. It takes a lot of force, and they both have to have the same amount of force, which you cannot do when you're in a 0 point, so that they cannot crash. I mean, they cannot
cannot.
into each other.
And the insurance companies don't like this.
Nope.
There's no money in it.
Well, I'm glad the hot AAA would be.
They
AAA would be out of business.
didn't Carr take the prototypes to General Motors or the auto manufacturers?
Yeah,
didn't
we went, because I was there.
Were you?
And we had talked to representatives of General Motors about, you know, the possibility of making this a reality. Of let's take a Chevette or whatever and do something with it this way. And the representatives, after hearing everything and seeing everything and knowing that we were onto something, said, you know, if you put them up there, we'll shoot them down. We can't allow this, and we'll get the Security Exchange Commission. We'll get conspiracy against you. We'll get everything we can to stop you. You are disrupting the monetary system of the United States, and we will not stand for that. So that was their attitude. They didn't want any development beyond their own control that happened, and they weren't interested in working.
So there are a lot of little pipelines tied into, you know, their vehicles, and the vehicles that we use, you know, gas pipelines, oil pipelines, whatever you want to call it. And all of that means money to a lot of people.
Right. Did Carr work singly on this idea by himself? Did he have help before you came along that you weren't aware of?
How much of Carr's track record do you know about? Did he share much of that, or did you
Well,
gain much knowledge on it?
I got to know him personally a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and he told me some things that he had experienced with Tesla, etc. And he was a very lonely person. I mean, he just said, God, I'm stuck with this. I know it works, but nobody will ever believe this. And I may never ever be able to prove it before I finish. You know, and he was in a dilemma all the time. I mean, he wanted so bad to get it exposed. And he would always talk about his guides. He had guides which he called, you know, guides from whatever, the other side or whatever, that were constantly guiding him. And he said Tesla was always with him, at least in his memory, because he was always saying, "Don't give up," or keep applying, keep on course, or hang on to the rod, or whatever it happened to be. He was diligent, but very frustrated at the same time. You know. So
When did he? I take it he's dead.
Yeah, he died in October of gosh, I don't know. It's been about 5 years ago, I guess, 5 or 6 years ago.
Are there many of the people? Are you still in contact with any of those people?
No, there's a Norman Colton. He went on to try to develop some more of Carr's stuff, and I guess he ran into problems. And there was a Dennis Ripolte. I don't know where he is. He was a electronics engineer and designer. I have no idea where he is.
What about Wayne? Wayne?
Oh, Wayne Aho, yeah, there was another person, Wayne Aho, and he's in Seattle, Washington. He has the New Age Foundation up there, and he was our publicity man. He was our entourage. He was our right hand, left hand. He did a lot of work with us, and we're still in touch. We're still very close friends. He was intelligence officer in the military, and when he got out, he tried to blow the whistle on UFO activities and stuff, and they disclaimed that he was even in the service, even though he had his service records and everything else. They tried to say he was never in the service. And then his brother, Arthur Oval, wrote an extremely interesting book called Tomorrow's Energy Need Not Be Fuel. And I used to have copies of it, and I guess I don't anymore. And it was about what we're talking about here today, that it's by natural design, there's plenty of energy. It's like a windmill. If you take a straight blade and curve it, just a 7-mile-an-hour wind will give you enough electricity to light your light bulbs. It's just how you put that angle in with nature so that it complements it, and you can get energy from it.
Isn't there some, they won't allow windmills anymore because, or windmill energy because it could actually light cities and so forth using wind energy?
Is that right?
Well, the power companies are, keeping a tight rein on it. There's...
But there are a lot of them in there's a place in California that has a lot of those.
Sure, in Palm Springs and everything, but what it is, they're making regulations and laws that require that the utility companies are the ones that control,
Just like solar panels.
And
Arco bought
see,
out
what we're talking about, creating zero gravity or alternative energy systems that Joe living next door that has an inclination to
Cup of brown sugar.
view it. Does that have a thing?
Yeah, we can view it.
One's 2 hours, 4 hours, one's 6 hours.
Oh, we just take what's on there. Whatever
Yeah.
you got is what you got. I mean, that's what's meant to be on it.
Well, just let's go back to what you were saying.
When you get through with this, you can put it on.
And put it on extended play in the copy.
I don't see any provision for that.
I'll be darned. It must be all standard play then.
All I wanted to share with you is where to introduce myself, and my name is Stephen Oldham.
How do you pronounce
And
that last name?
Troy has
Oldham,
introduced
stale
himself.
meat. And Troy, he kind of has gotten out of this so far. But since I've been real small, like 5 years old, I've been real. I don't know if the word's empathetic, or I have a feeling. I really feel for things. John mentioned it. Now maybe not has been the same, but I would look around and see what was going on as a little kid. I mean, a lot of people experience this. A lot of kids experience this probably. And I say, well, we got this thing called the military, and we got these things called governments all over the world, and we're fighting. What's going on this planet? I mean, it was because it was real foreign to me, and it always has been real foreign to me. And I've always been of the nature of, everybody can have these wonderful things, and why doesn't everybody have a nice home? Why doesn't everybody have the wherewithal? Why do people starve? We have the technology, and I knew it. I knew it. And I says, but yet we're putting all our effort and all our money into defense to protect people from, and it's because it's money. It makes money, and there are certain people that, some people will tell me, they'll tell me that they think they're doing right. They feel they're doing right. Well, I can buy that to a certain point, but I think we all know deep down spiritually what is right and wrong, okay? But you have people that they're playing this game and they're here for whatever lesson. I used to look at that, and when I was little, the flying wing was flying. That was I was born in '52, I'm not real old, but the flying wing they quit flying the flying wing in about the late 50s, I think, maybe 56, 57. But I was a little kid, and I remember seeing that thing fly over a couple times. This is kind of relevant, just my thought on this. That's one of the things that they took it out of existence. And if you look at the stealth bomber, basically virtually a flying wing. Okay, so they have a habit of, there's all been this stuff going on, and I've been aware of this for a long time. And my thing is, like John, I wanted to investigate and find out and expose it. But that's not where the attention needs to be focused. The attention needs to be focused on people like Ralph, people like John, Tyler, and us. And there's all these other people that brought these things forward, and they've sort of been, maybe it hasn't been time. It hasn't been time because the planet's not ready for it. As Ralph was saying, we're individuals, but yet we're part of the whole. And what I feel, he feels, and what he feels, you feel, if you really have the perception to see it. So I guess why I'm involved in this is really because I've always felt that we should all have a nice place to live in, and we shouldn't have people that are suffering. And when I see, you know, power companies don't want people to have wind generation or stuff like that, it bothers me, but I shouldn't focus on that, and that's what I've learned, that's the lesson I've learned. We don't focus on that, we just create them. It's like when a business starts a new project, you hear Ross Perot talk about how the government should operate. He says, you know, you don't dump the whole system and start a new one over here. You start a prototype, or you start you put a test system in place and see how that works. Well, the government doesn't necessarily, and I use the term the government, certain factions don't want us to do certain things. I don't have to ask them to do it, we just start doing it.
Right.
And if there's enough people of like mind doing it in a lot of different places, with the way we have the means to communicate and network this stuff, what I want to do is get what he knows and what she knows and what he knows and put little models together. That's what I want to do. Little models so we can see the principles and ideas and watch them do their thing. Now Ralph explained it. When this thing happened, this experience happened, how do you explain that and how do you show that? But you can levitate models and you can levitate balls and things and show that there's something here. And that's what I like to see.
Or the cloud analogy.
I was really enamored with that last night when you said that. Would you tell that story again?
Well, it's
a metaphor.
People, because of my interest in defense of levitation, I've had to find a way to show people in a very limited state of mind, because their attention span is usually of just 2 or 3 seconds sometimes, in tolerating my insanities or my unconformed ideas. So I found the analogy that they can think about for the rest of their life of levitation, and that is, you know, I'm asking them the weight of water, which is, they will sometimes come up with, you know, a figure between 8 and 9 pounds per gallon. And that's a lot of weight. If you had to carry 2 or 3 gallons of water, or 5 gallons, or 10 gallons, it's a lot of weight. I get them thinking about the weight of water, how heavy it is, really. I mean, it's very heavy. A tub full of water can't be lifted by a person very easily. I mean, it's very heavy, a bathtub. But when they get thinking about that, then I, in explaining levitation, say, well, look right over your head, you know, at those clouds. Now, what would you estimate, you know, how big would you say?
How many gallons of water are up there?
And you know, there's billions of tons of water every day moved around the planet in this time of the year by nature. And it's all done by the natural principles that Walter Russell and Otis Carr and Tesla were talking about. It's a balance. Everything is in balance. And we're the unbalanced, the humans have been unbalanced in the way they want it to happen, instead of accepting the way that it does happen. But there's billions of tons just sitting there in suspended space. I mean, tons of you know, people say, well, it's not it's in a gaseous form, et cetera, but it's real rain when it comes down. I mean, it's heavy, heavy water.
Yes, it is.
Pouring out
real
of the sky.
Heavy water.
Heavy water.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in a sense, is something to ponder on the idea of levitation. That nature does it every day, right in front of our very eyes, and that people don't realize, you know, how simple it is.
Right in front of our nose.
Right in front of our nose.
See, Ralph, like where you worked in the Costa Mesa or Costa Rica, Costa Mesa, wherever you were, and you had that one job, and you talked about going home and for $100 you put these things together. I would like, or the same, if you do the same thing right now, be able to show people, you know, do seminars and have that kind of stuff set up.
That's where I think this meeting is important. You know, after we introduce the rest of the people and get some input, I'd like to get on with what we can do now to start developing some
Because
ideas.
it'll start, I know without a doubt that once you come together as a group, and once you just take a few steps, you have to take some steps and it may be putting something in your hands, the rest of it just keeps coming. It just keeps magnetizing to it.
And see, if each one of us input our ideas, like my idea right now. See, I don't even look at Carr's device anymore in that respect, because it's like the Model A or the Model T, really, because of the advent of computers and solid state circuitry and all these other the different materials they have available today, etc. And I want to start from square one on our ideas and start building it from that standpoint. And the first thing that comes to me is I've got a CAD program coming from Ted, if he ever gets it over here. But I've got a demo of it that shows these different geometric patterns.
I've got one. I don't know what the name of your CAD is.
What's the name of that? Do you remember the name of that?
AutoCAD, Design CAD. AutoCAD.
Yeah. I think that's the name of it. Is that what you got?
I got Design CAD, but I've worked with AutoCAD.
Well, it shows all the geometric. You can see anything you want from any angle you want, but the most significant thing that John pointed out the other night is it shows the center of gravity all the time. Wherever you're at, it shows that center of gravity, which is the 0 point, which is related to the 0 point, around the 0 point.
When you control the center of gravity, you control everything else that it's attached to.
The guy in Florida that moved those giant rocks knew that 0 point. He knew how to move those giant rocks because he understood the center of gravity, the relationship to 0 gravity.
Yeah.
So I think, like, for me, I want to get into that CAD program more and study it from different perspectives now and different geometric forms that we can design with very simple stuff from Radio Shack, or not even Radio Shack, just drugstore stuff that we can put together and just experiment with them, because it's like Buckminster Fuller challenged the world at one time when he said that he could build a dome it was at Ontario, it was in Canada for the World's Fair. He's going to build this gigantic dome to house all the facilities in it, and all the engineers, professionals of the world at the time or whatever said no, it can't be done because the weight it'll fall on itself. This gigantic dome will it just can't be done. And Fuller, studying geometric patterns like he did, knew that if after you have these patterns in sync for so long, you create a resonance in effect, and it will actually go the other way. It will get lighter and lighter and lighter. Well, somehow he got his ideas across and he built it in wherever it was in Canada. And they mathematically weighed this thing, and it was unbelievable that it was almost taking off just because of its form, just the way it was designed.
Now that's the geometric form, the way it sits in the electromagnetic field.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it is an electromagnetic field.
It is.
I mean,
Form itself.
It forms its own field.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's within another field, right?
Well,
I mean, is there electromagnetic field in the planet, around the planet?
yes.
Okay. And everything else has an electromagnetic field.
It's 0.5 Gauss.
Which I don't. Those are the
It's
kind of
what?
things. If somebody's going to
The
teach,
electromagnetic field of the Earth is measured at 0.5 Gauss.
and what I'm looking at is when you sit down with somebody, it's got to be able to be explained, to be shown, or without. I don't believe it has to be too complicated.
it is.
And when you say point whatever Gauss, along with that, you need to be able to say, and Gauss is just like that. It doesn't. And I'm not. It's not anything meant against you, John, but
Yeah.
to say that when you cannot clarify it with simplicity, you're not educating and you're not communicating.
Okay.
Okay. Do you know what I'm saying?
I
Because I
know
can
what
say
you're
I'm
saying.
ignorant.
I know what you're saying, and listen to something for just a minute here, because I'm sure Ralph can relate to this, and a lot of other people can relate to this. The very process of defining things can be a detriment to getting ahead in this world. Okay? the very process involved with weighing and coloring and labeling things, okay? I believe that Otis T. Carr not only had some guidance, but also worked on a very intuitive level. In other words, aesthetically, it's almost like aesthetically, he knew how it had to look in order how to function.
Right, he knew that before
Okay.
he... See, that was the thing. He had conceptually...
I believe that
knew.
things can be built purely upon aesthetics.
Well, see, you
Without
don't
any
need
math,
you don't need a
resistance.
physical ship to do what Otis T. Carr did, to take it one step further.
Okay.
Because we as spiritual entities do it.
Ideally, we know this. Ideally, we know this. Can you do that now?
No, that's what I'm telling
Okay,
you.
I
I
can't.
can't.
Okay, why can't we? Because we haven't taken the first steps. Don't we need to experience it first to know what it feels like to do it, like Ralph did?
Yeah, I'd like
You
to
know.
share something which will clarify what his point of view is. And
Yeah, because
you know,
I
one
want
of
to
the
make sure you
things-
understand what I'm saying.
One of the things that I 100% understand what you just said, and I 100% understand what you just said, because
Okay.
I've worked
She
many,
deals with me
many
every day.
years with children, working with special children, special needs kids, and that covers a whole territory, okay? And one of the things I found is you need to learn to speak in a different language to children because their minds work in a very different way. They're not blocked. But one of the things that I also know is that, typical example, I'm John at Oldham, by the way. We were sitting up reading some things the other night, and I started to get some things, and the ideas just flow. I start to do a little drawing, little this, little that, trying at least to put some image here so I can maintain what I'm getting. Because there are no words for me to write it down. There are no pictures I can just go get and say, look, this is what I was thinking. And somehow I started to explain something. Stephen says, you know, like, what are you doing? And I started to try and explain to him whatever it was, the image that I was getting. And he said, well, no, wait a minute. What does that mean? And it's like bubbles popping all over the universe. Because as I tried to stop to tell him what that one point meant, all the bubbles were bursting. My flow was gone. So I understand totally what he's saying about the need to have those bubbles solidified and transferred, because otherwise they don't do any good.
Yeah.
But I do understand, back in '77, I had a very powerful training session. I came in with a lot of memory, and just always being around math, geometric form, and the harmonics and the balance of the universe. I arrived on this planet, was born. Okay. One of the things that was real difficult for me was to find out that the rest of the world wasn't moving along the same branch. And that at nights, as I would go off to sleep, I would drift out of my body, be part of this huge other world, and it was very comfortable, and it was very, I did it all with full, knowledge. And then back again in the morning, and I thought, all my little friends did that. I thought, this is typical of everybody at night. This is what everybody did on the planet. And no, they don't. Most people, and even now, when I go to sleep, I forget. I wake up, I might remember parts of it. I wish I had that clarity back again, and maybe someday I will. But one of the things that back in the early 70s I started really getting was to do something with geometric form. To really do something, not just look and know that it was creating actual magic on the planet, but to do something to show that. And this was right around the time that Pat Flanagan came out. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was before that, because the only thing that I'd heard of was that in, I believe it was Czechoslovakia, somewhere in Europe, that they had found that pyramidal-shaped cartons kept milk from going bad. And that channeled something in that said, yes, then, go and remember and play with that. And then whilst I was playing with, I had pyramids all over the house, all different materials.
Was that before
all
your
different
experience,
kinds.
your learning?
Before. That was before.
Okay.
So as I progressed with these experiments, it was nothing, now there's hundreds of books out on it. But at that time, there was nothing on the, the shape, the design, the form, and what they were doing. I happened to stumble on one thing, and that was a bowl of a fish bowl put underneath a pyramid with 2 or 3 goldfish in, the water never purified. You know, the fecal matter would just sink to the bottom of the bowl. The water stayed crystal clear. The fish were fine. Now, a bowl outside of the pyramid would need to be changed every couple of days because the water gets murky, the fish will die. They need that energy, supposedly oxygen or whatever it is, the exchanges. But under the pyramid, they didn't seem to need that. They did perfectly fine. The only time I changed the water was because, you know, material started building up from the bottom, and, you know, you have to eventually throw it out. So that made me remember something that I'd always known since I was a child, that water is one of our strongest connectors to understanding all these finer energies and how they work. That water is our translator. So I want to talk about econ too in just a minute, but in '77, after I'd done a lot of these experiments and done a whole roll, I was taken in a real multi-dimensional experience that showed me for 2 to 3 days, almost 3 days, how all things are structured. All the vortexes, all the planetary systems, how everything